World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity. This is clarity.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals.
Once again, it's a big good evening from me, Kervin, Julien, on Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio, and coming to you from Coventry City, United Kingdom.
I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet.
We've got a very topical and sensitive show for you tonight.
Rearrange. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
You'll have to bear with me for a while. I'm struggling to get hold of my co-host, Dr. David Romay, at the moment.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
So we do have two special guests on today's show, and today's show is Rodney Patrick McLean. McNeal, sorry, McLean. That's my cousin's name. Rodney Patrick McNeal story.
I had to repent.
Wrongful convictions.
Doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and done, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
Tonight, we're looking at the story of Rodney Patrick McNeal. A man known and loved by many, who's currently served 18 of a 30-year to life sentence for a murder he did not commit. Now you may argue, but tonight we hope to prove beyond doubt that Rodney Patrick McNeal should be a free man.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very.
Believe it or not, I've just finished another 12-hour stand-up shift.
The street, I was getting money.
Rushed home, got in the door.
The whole game has been real.
And I just can't wait to present this show to you tonight.
Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
Our opening track, as ever, by Ronnie Canada.
Already did.
Exclusively and specially just for this show.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Track entitled Paid for My Crime.
Drug dealer sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time.
Now, I don't know what you've been doing. I don't know what you've been looking at for the week.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We're definitely going to miss David's rant this week.
Are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
The Panama Papers hot off the press. Another Clinton Gate, possibly.
Trying to cope with this living here.
With the Wall Street dialogue.
Trying to cope with this living here.
Hillary reeling and holding on to the ropes for dear life.
Trying to cope with this living here.
But no doubt as the week goes through, we're going to hear plenty of that.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
But tonight,
our Father who art in heaven,
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day.
without any further ado, I want to introduce you to our guests. And first and foremost, let me introduce you to Alex Simpson. Are you there, Alex? Hello, Alex. Good evening.
I'm still here. Hi. How are you?
Okay, just a little opportunity for you to introduce yourself and what you do, sir.
Sure. My name is Alex Simpson. I'm the Associate Director of the California... and we've been representing Rodney. Rodney for quite some time.
Okay. And we're really looking forward to what you're going to have to contribute on the show tonight. And we've also got Jennifer. Hi, Jen.
Yes, hello.
Okay,
Hi.
we're not going to divulge your identity any further. We're going to just leave that there for various reasons, for your well-being, most importantly. But if you could just give the audience a little bit about who you are and what you're doing and why you're on the show tonight.
I'm on the show on behalf of Rodney Patrick McNeal. I am a friend of his and an advocate for him, and I work with the California Innocence Project on his behalf.
Okay, and how long have you worked on the project with it? How long have you
worked?
Yeah.
I've worked about 2 years with the Innocence Project. On Patrick's behalf. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I should say that Jennifer has been a tireless advocate for Rodney. This is really one of the things that differentiates his case from so many of the cases that we see are people like Jennifer who kind of take the baton and try to move these cases forward when people have really forgotten about them.
You know, the funny thing is we've dealt with a couple of cases of wrongful convictions over the last year or so since we started this particular show. And I myself was involved as a campaign manager for a group of guys that I knew back in '88 who were sentenced to life for a murder that we knew they didn't commit. And we campaigned for 4 years. They were sentenced to life. But it got us 4 years. It took us 4 years to get them out on appeal, which doesn't sound like much, but 4 years is a long time out of anybody's life. When you're serving it for something that you actually haven't done. And some of the most traumatic issues that came out of that was one of the innocents who was eventually released on appeal after 4 years. His father died while he was still incarcerated, so never got to hear that news that his son was proven innocent and released. Even though he believed he believed his son was innocent, he died while his son was still serving life for a murder that most people knew he couldn't have committed. And there are all different types of scenarios that take place, and the impact of wrongful convictions don't just rob the family of the person that's wrongly convicted, but it also robs the family of the victim, I believe, because the wrong person is serving a sentence for the loss of their loved one. And it's wrongful grieving, and if the truth ever comes to light, this person is going to be forced to go through that experience all over again. So there's all sorts of ramifications for wrongful convictions, but let's just try and get into this particular one, because this is the one that we're talking about. And when I first saw this story, and it was brought to my attention, it stuck out. It really stuck out like a sore thumb. And I remember having an engagement, a conversation with you, Jennifer, where we exchanged some dialogue because there was some stuff that I just wanted to know about him. But before we get to talk about Rodney, let's just talk about the crime, shall we? Detail the crime for us. What was he sentenced for? Outlay it for us so that we can have an understanding of what it is that Rodney had to go up against. And then we'll talk about him and his defence and possibly what went wrong there.
Alex, would you like to talk about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to, or unhappy to in this tragic case. Rodney or Patrick he was an individual who was, pretty much a normal run-of-the-mill guy. Was married to somebody, expecting a child on the way. He came home one day to find that she had been brutally murdered in their house. And, in these situations, the number one thing that people look to, that when the law enforcement sees that there is a murder of an individual who's married, they almost always focus on the spouse. And that's exactly what happened. They really just kind of ignored all of the key pieces of evidence that pointed away from him and really just started to build the case around who they thought had committed this crime. And it was, this is one of the things that I think is something that's really, really tragic in this particular case is, you imagine the worst possible thing that would ever happen to you, coming home to find your wife and unborn child brutally murdered. And that's the start of your nightmare for you, because for Patrick, that was only the beginning of this almost 2 decades long odyssey to try to prove his innocence. And that's just something that it's just so hard to conceptualize. It's something that hopefully none of your listeners have ever had to deal with or will ever have to deal with. But that was just something that was really the beginning of the nightmare for him.
Rodney Patrick McNeal was not just an ordinary member of the community, though, was he?
No, I mean he was actually working for the county as a probation officer. So, and this was a guy who, we always talk about him as he's one of the most kind of upstanding people in our roster here. This guy who just had, was working as a probation officer, working to, try to hopefully help those who have fallen on the wrong side of the law. And it was, this in a moment, his entire world changed so that he, had went down this particular path. And we're trying to get him off of that path as quickly as possible. But this is something that I'm sure, if somebody is in law enforcement and somebody is a probation officer, somebody who's trying to help the system and to have the system turn on him and have him be the focus of the investigation is really a tragedy.
Was there anything else that Patrick was known for in the community, respected for?
Well, he was a homeowner. He was also a father of 2 other children. And he was pursuing his career to be a policeman. He was actually, at the time of the murder, going for interviews in Arizona to pursue to be a policeman. Okay,
so in effect, a real stand-up guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, a real stand-up guy, a guy with integrity, a guy with morals, a guy with values, a guy with ambition, a guy who wanted to do well, wanted to make a difference, who was, that's the type of guy he was, right?
Yeah, and this is something that, by the way, that you don't always see in wrongful conviction cases. Sometimes what happens is that there are cases where people are, say, for example, members of the gang, and that's why police start to focus on this person, and they're innocent because they didn't commit the crime, but they are part of a criminal element, and so it's hardly surprising when the police focus their attention on him. And this was exactly the opposite. This person, there was no indication, there's no reason, no justification or motivation that the police could really point their finger at, and as you see in these typical cases. And it's just tragic, all the more tragic because of it.
We've got a lot of outside noise, aeroplanes. Are you near an airport or something?
I'm sorry, I am. Yes. I
Okay.
apologize.
All right, that's coming through loud and clear, unfortunately. If there's a way that we can quieten it down a bit, I really would appreciate it. Now, let me just ask another question here. In the reports, they talked about police have been called to the house on previous occasions for domestic issues between Patrick and his wife. So they were known to have a problematic relationship. Was that fair to be said?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the reason why it was very easy for them to draw the conclusion that this was their man.
Okay,
Patrick and his wife Deborah had had some problems in their marriage, as many people do, and that was part of the reason why they decided that it had to have been him because of these issues.
Okay, and in these issues that they've had, where police have been called to the house for these domestic issues and any other issues that might have been reported, had there ever been any form of violence where anyone would turn around and say, well, but that's a bit over the top?
I think it's traditionally what we would talk about when we're talking about their relationship is that it was very tumultuous. And occasionally what would happen is that Deborah would get very agitated and sometimes mess stuff up in the house. And the thing that was always surprising to us when we were looking through it is that it was always that Deborah was having problems and say, for example, pulling all of the food out of the refrigerator and throwing it on the floor. And Patrick would always have to kind of clean up and was unbelievably patient about this sort of thing.
And you would have imagined with his experience as being a probation officer and working in that kind of environment with vulnerable individuals who are tempestuous and moody, to say the least, it's not nothing that he wouldn't have been used to having to deal with.
Exactly.
What was his wife like? Do we know what his wife was like? Either one of you.
Well, I think that she was about 5 or 6 months pregnant, and Patrick describes her as having some emotional problems that came on with her pregnancy. So I think that some of these problems and the times that the police were called were during her pregnancy, whether it was hormonal or something else. So she got agitated a lot.
And that's common in a lot of relationships, right? I mean, it's not really what you need to write home to mother about. A lot of relationships have these type of, especially during pregnancies, will have these hormonal issues where even police are called out sometimes. So that's nothing to take to the bank yet. Now, I just want to move this on a little bit because on this particular day, March the 10th, 1997, I believe it was.
Yes.
Patrick was at work, right?
Yes, he was at work.
Okay, talk us through that. Patrick's at work, and because I believe the time of the murder is, well, he comes back about 12:30, right? Is that 12:30 midday? 12:15 midday?
The time that Patrick came home was about 12:29.
Okay, and that's about midday, right?
Right, about midday.
Okay, and how long from that time working backwards would the autopsy or the report would have said that Deborah had been dead?
Well, we do have a report that states that 12:42, which was one of the paramedics wrote that she was in late rigor mortis.
Which means that she had been dead. Go on.
That means that she had been dead longer than 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Okay. So there's this man at work. And did he normally come home at that time? Was this early for him? Was this his normal time of coming home on a day like this?
He only came home that day because she had a doctor's appointment and he was going with her.
Okay. So she was expecting him?
She was expecting him, yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to build a picture for the audience before we really get into this, because I have read through quite a lot, but I do believe that there's probably going to be some more golden nuggets to come yet. Now, he's come home 12:15, 12:29, I think you said. And he's got into the house, and from what I can see from this is that he's got into the house and he's found her in the bathtub.
Yes.
Explain that for me. Either you or Alex, either one of you, just explain the scenario. What did he find when he got home?
Do you want me to do this, Alex, or do you want to do it? I think we lost Alex.
That's fine.
That's okay. Patrick walked in the door. The door was wide open. When he walked into his living room, his house had been ransacked. He assumed that he had been burglarized. When he called his wife's name and she did not respond, he immediately went around the house looking for her and found her in the master bedroom, in the bathtub. She had been stabbed 16 times. There was furniture put on top of her and she was wet. So it is assumed that the bathtub had been filled. There was blood all over the kitchen, all over the floor, a huge pile of blood in the living room. He immediately went to call 911, but could not find the phone. And on those days in 1997, we did not have cell phones. So when he finally found it, the cord had been cut. So he ran to one neighbor. They were not home, and he ran to another neighbor and finally called 911 at about 12:29-ish. He was in the house, he estimated, for about a minute, and the police arrived about 12:32.
Sorry, carry on.
So the police arrived about 12:32.
Okay. And upon their arrival, right, obviously Rodney had not tried to move anything. Nothing had been displaced. He hadn't tried to cover up anything. Everything was as it was when he found it, when he came home.
The house had been ransacked. Every single drawer, every single closet had been ransacked through. So he tried to lift her out of the tub, but could not. And then ran out and tried to call 911, and then called 911.
Was there ever any reports of anything missing, taken from the house?
Yes. Some guns that he had were taken from the house. That is what they can confirm.
Okay. All right. Well, look, for me, we're really trying to piece this together, because I know that you've campaigned for a long while, and I'm not sure if Alex is still there. He's still on the line as far as I'm aware. We're just having difficulty getting him to participate in the conversation at the moment, whether he's lost his signal, his end. What I might do is I'll just try and call him back in again and see if I can get him back in. But for our audience, for their sake, for their understanding, when the police arrived, what was their immediate response? How did they treat Rodney?
They treated Patrick, nicely. He was still obviously in the clothes that he wore when he went to work, and there was not any blood on his hands, his person, his shoes, nowhere. He told me that he was at the scene of the crime for some time, but then taken to the police station for questioning.
So the people at work, right, verified that the clothes that he was taken to questioning in was the clothes that he actually wore to work that day.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And on those clothes, there are no traces of her blood or blood spatters that could connect him to the vicious assault that would have taken place on Deborah prior to her dying.
Right. It was a very bloody scene, and he did not have any blood on his person's hands, shoes, clothing.
Was he shocked that they were trying to insinuate that he might have played a part in this? How shocked was he? What did he say? What was his response?
Well, I have video. I have seen the videotapes of his of his. I don't want to say interrogation, but of his police
questioning.
His questioning, right? And he's crying. He's upset. He's wondering, his stepson lived with him. He's wondering where his stepson is. He knows what's going on because he is a probation officer. So he knows exactly what steps are going to be happening. On that day, they actually did do a lie detector test. But it came out inconclusive because you can obviously understand why. If you are in a tragic accident or you have something that's happening to you, a lie detector test will not show accuracy when your blood pressure is high, when you've just found out that your wife is murdered, your adrenaline is going. So he knew exactly what was going on, and he was there for quite some time, many, many hours.
I would have imagined, on top of all of that, he was absolutely emotionally distraught, because that wasn't just an individual that he found lying dead. That was actually his wife, whom he knew,
and his unborn child,
and whom he knew to be pregnant.
That's right.
So I would have imagined, right, that his emotions would have been all over the place.
They were. He was on the tape. You can tell he's angry, he's upset, he's tired, he's crying, he's concerned. He's all over the place. Yes.
And how were on that question? How were the police responding to his state, his condition, his behavior? How are they responding to that as he's been interviewed?
I think the interview, as I recall, the policemen were doing their job. They were asking questions on different angles. They were giving him tissues to try to, help him out. But I think they were they thought, oh, we got our man right now. We're just going to keep pressuring him. Okay,
so let me play devil's advocate now, right?
Sure.
So I arrive on the scene, and I'm the cop. I'm the local guy who they send in for homicide, and I'm gonna be investigating this thing now. And what actually happens is that I get there, and my colleagues, the first responders to the scene, explain to me what they think took place, or what they found when they got here, and introduced me to the guy who allegedly made the call, who's the husband of the woman, and I look around and I see this scene, and somebody else whispers in my ear that, by the way, there has been call-outs to this place here before. Issues of domestic violence. This guy might be implicated somehow. And at that time, I would have imagined they actually haven't got any testimony or any evidence that can corroborate his story as to had been to work and those are the clothes that he was wearing. I'm imagining at that point in time they've not done that yet. They're just dealing with the scene as they've arrived, right?
Right.
Okay. So now I hear these things, and I think to myself, well, okay, well let's take him in. Why, in your opinion, do you feel that the police did not look any further once they had been given the information that he was at work, these were the clothes that he was wearing, and there is no evidence that these clothes have been anywhere near the body while it was either attacked, etc. Why do you think that they didn't look anywhere else?
It was okay. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, I'm still on the line. I was just having some problems with my phone here.
That's fine.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very common thing. I mean, what you're describing is a fairly common and well understood kind of habit that we have just as human beings, and police officers are no different. If you've got somebody who has been murdered and they're the spouse, significant other of a person, it's very common that this sort of thing happens. It's very uncommon that another person would do something like this if you've got, somebody who's married. It's the old adage that there's very few people in life that are going to make you so mad as to commit murder, but your significant other might get you to that spot, and police understand that.
Yeah, I mean it's not uncommon for the spouse to be, and it's normally most murders are normally by somebody right?
Right, and I think in this situation, it's not that the police are doing things in a way that is in some way they're trying to frame Rodney in this particular way, in some sort of insidious way that they know that he didn't do it, but they're trying to get him anyway. It's really just that they understand that very likely what's going to happen is that if they do the investigation towards Rodney, then they're banking on that they're going to be right about it. And the downside about that particular approach to it is that you ignore any of the other evidence, like what we're describing, like, for example, that he didn't have any blood on him, that he didn't have any evidence that he had been participating in a struggle, that he didn't have a lot of time to commit this crime. You kind of tend to discount that if you've already come to the conclusion that he's committed the crime.
Okay, just on those areas alone, before we take it to another level, just on those areas alone, right? How good was his defense at defending him on those arguments?
Well, I mean, it's tough to armchair quarterback any particular case and to say that, this absolutely, if it had been me, I would have done it in this particular way and I would have won. But what you're talking about is an absence of criminal conduct as the strongest evidence that you have. That obviously, there wasn't anything that Jennifer is describing, and I think your listeners understand. This is an incredibly brutal, up close, very violent murder, and in those situations, what you have are, if you're talking about the suspect, you would see evidence of that you would see that there would be, blood all over the place, or that the clothes would be contaminated with the victim's blood, and there just wasn't anything like that. Whether or not that gets translated to the jury in the right way is sometimes it's tough to communicate that, especially when you don't have anybody else to point the finger at.
You said that his wife was, with baby, okay, but I'm sure. Did you say at the beginning, Jennifer, that he had 2 other children?
Yes, he did.
What are their ages? Do you mind me asking?
At the time of the murder, they were 3 and 6.
Okay, so they were too young at the time to be able to give proper evidence and information about the marriage, the relationship, what their mum and dad were like.
Yes, they did not live at the home. They lived with their mother.
They lived with their mother. Right.
So this was his second wife.
Okay.
So they were only there for visiting. They did not live there.
Okay. I'm with you now. Okay. Now, let's start looking at alternatives. Is there an alternative theory to how his wife died?
Yeah, there's an alternative theory that is actually the correct theory, which we didn't actually at the time understand or have any kind of real evidence about. It was only through later investigation that we were able to discover the actual perpetrator and piece together the case against him.
Okay, and let's talk about that. Piece that together for us. Well, what is the without naming, or I don't know what we can or what we can't go into for litigation or for legal reasons, etc. But tell us what you can about what makes the alternative theory more plausible.
Well, all of this is public record in all of the documents that we've presented to the court. But there's two theories about it. First of all, is that the sheer absence of evidence pointing towards Patrick. And so in making our case to the court, what we've been trying to explain is that, if you are trying to find, as we've been discussing, if you're trying to find the actual perpetrator, you need to have evidence that shows that the perpetrator is participating in this very heinous crime. And there just wasn't anything like that. So even if we're not able to definitively show who the perpetrator was, we do know that there's one person who it could not be, and that's Patrick McNeal. In addition, a few years ago, and many years after Patrick's conviction and sentence, Patrick's brother, Jeff West, was arrested for a double homicide in Las Vegas. And it was a particularly brutal crime. We discovered through our investigation of that case that he had not only committed other offenses, particularly against women and close family members of his, but he also had confessed to a number of different family members that he had committed this crime.
He is confessed to committing this crime.
That's right.
Okay.
And when we were initially looking through it, this is something that was obviously very shocking to us. But Patrick and his brother were half brothers. They weren't, very, very close. But and they really kind of took different paths in life. Patrick was the fine, upstanding probation officer, and Jeff was the criminal, cold-blooded killer who just took a completely different path in his life. And what he told family members and friends of both Patrick and Jeff were that he had committed this murder because he was very frustrated that Deborah, Patrick's wife, was causing Patrick so much grief and so much problems in his life as a result of their tumultuous relationship. And he just decided one day that he'd had enough of it.
Oh. And in a hearing, right, a friend of his testified in detail.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Right.
That he had beat her until she was unconscious, that he had dragged her into the bathroom,
mm-hmm.
and that the evidence that he gave actually lined up with the facts as it was in the way that she died and was killed.
That's right. And again, initially we were incredibly skeptical of some of these comments and the statements that other people had made regarding this confession. It's something that was obviously we weren't expecting, something that is hard to accept. I think it's hard for Patrick to accept that his brother could have committed this crime. But the more we dove into it, the more we dug into who Jeff was as a person, the more it started to make sense.
Is Patrick still unbelieving that it's his half brother?
I think there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and understanding it emotionally. And I think he might understand it intellectually, but I don't think he'll ever accept it emotionally.
So what went wrong at the trial? What went wrong at the trial? Was it his defense? Was it the jury? Was it a biased judge? What went wrong? What went wrong during the trial? How can this evidence clearly point out to his innocence, yet he was found guilty? How does that happen?
Yeah, this is the unfortunate thing about trying to piece these cases together after years and years is that people don't tend to remember things like a video recorder. And so when any witness is saying, yes, I remember Jeff saying to me that he had committed this crime, the other side is going to say, well, let me see if there are any inconsistencies in your story that I can exploit. So, for example, what were you wearing 10 years ago on a random Saturday? If you say a blue shirt and I show you evidence that it was a red shirt, well, you're not necessarily lying about that. It's just that you're not particularly, that wasn't a particularly memorable piece of information for you to take down. But that is shown to be an inconsistency, and that's what happened with these witnesses, is that they tried to remember as best they could, but any particular inconsistencies were really exploited by the prosecution as evidence that they were making the whole thing up.
But the facts spoke, right? The fact that did any of his colleagues come to court? Were they called up to give evidence?
Yeah, I mean, we had the friend that you mentioned was a guy with really no axe to grind that just wanted to explain this kind of terrible confession that Jeff had given to him. And we also had many of Jeff's former girlfriends and ex-wives who talked about not just him confessing to this crime, but also to some horrible abuse that he had committed upon these women. There was stories of Jeff dragging one of them out to a field and beating her with a bicycle chain and threatening to light her on fire, and ultimately even that wasn't sufficient for us to establish that Patrick's brother was the one who committed this crime. It really just shows you more than anything else how difficult it is to reverse a conviction. It's almost impossible to convince a judge that 12 people sitting in judgment on somebody have got it wrong.
I suppose, in a sense, you're right, but it's the evidence that's supposed to be either convicting or setting them free. And let me just give you a scenario. And I was chairman of the campaign for the Cardiff 3, who initially, it was Cardiff 5 actually. 5 of them were initially arrested. Let me just paint this little picture for you so you can understand what I'm talking about. Basically, a woman, a prostitute, was murdered in a predominantly black community. For 10 months, they were looking for a single individual, a white man who was seen sat down on the steps of the premises where this body was found, with the blood on his hands, with his head in his hands, around the time of the murder, at the time she was supposed to have died. For 10 months they looked for this fella, and then they couldn't find him. 10 months later they went into the community, and they rallied round over 3,000 local men and put them in through the police station one by one, and then whittled it down to 5, and then charged the 5 men. All 5 men had nothing to do with each other. They were, in fact, the Acti brothers. They were cousins, but they didn't get on, and all the others that were in this gang of 5 had no relationship with one another. But they put these guys on trial. They had semen. They had blood. They had saliva. They had a perfect palm print in the victim's blood on wallpaper. They had all of this as evidence. None of this fitted the 5 people that were arrested and charged, and yet they were still convicted and found guilty. But it took us 4 years we found some of the evidence in their own lockup. And that's cutting a long story short. Basically, 4 years later, we were able to go to the Court of Appeal, and after 3 days of what could have been a very lengthy appeal case, the judge sent them home and quashed the conviction. So for me, I'm struggling when I hear, it's almost in disbelief that when evidence is presented that is inconsistent with the facts, how people are still convicted, and B, when the argument is, well, you've got the wrong guy, why no one wants to listen? It's as if nobody's interested in the truth. Is that not what justice was supposed to be about, the truth?
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about are, I think, things that are very common in the criminal justice system, and things that I think are very frustrating to hear from people who have not participated in it or experienced it, is that, it's very difficult for, number one, for the prosecution to let it go, to admit that there has been a mistake. And I think actually you across the pond do, I think, a much better job of this than prosecutors in the States. It's a very difficult thing for a prosecutor to come in and say, yes, based on the evidence that you're now presenting to me, I have no confidence in the conviction.
The funny thing is, I really wish my co-host David Ramey was here today, because his area of expertise is prosecutorial misconduct, and he understands the system over there especially very well. And some of the things that we've discussed when we've talked about cases like this is the role that the district attorneys play in this thing, and how almost irrespective of whatever the facts or the evidence might be, once they decide a guy is guilty, 9 times out of 10 that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
Is that how is that how you found it in this case?
I think that it is certainly how we had it in this case, and I think that's something that is unfortunately, another thing of human nature, that it's very difficult. It takes a very big person to come forward and say, yes, I got it wrong, and I'm willing to admit it. I'm willing to accept it. I think that kind of the more knee-jerk and more common and more human reaction is to say, no, you're wrong. And that's certainly what happened in this situation. We were just never able to, no matter how much evidence that we presented, no matter how many people we brought in to say this person, it just makes more sense that this person would be the person who committed the crime, and far less sense that Patrick was the one to commit the crime. No matter how much evidence we presented, it wasn't even on the table. The prosecution was never going to go for it.
Do you feel like you're fighting a lost cause?
I never want to say that any of our cases are a lost cause. We've been fighting for Patrick's release for an incredibly long period of time. I don't ever want to close the book on any of our cases. But the frustrating thing is that we have been tilting at windmills in this case for a very long period of time. And it's sometimes frustrating, especially when we're having a conversation right now where it sounds like everybody here is reasonable and understanding of what's going on. And we do acknowledge that there are wrongful convictions across the country and across the world. But for some reason, the powers that be in this particular case seem to ignore all that. Because of that, then Patrick remains in prison.
What is Patrick's demeanor now? What is he like? Is he upbeat? Is he I'm just going to do this thing and get it over and done with, or where's Patrick in this?
I think Patrick, when you speak to him, he does not appear to be somebody that belongs in prison, and that is something that you notice right away. We had a detective go and visit him, and the detective said within 3 minutes I knew he was innocent. He just doesn't. His demeanor, his looks, everything about him, you know that he is innocent. He has been very, very positive, and knows that someday he will be coming home. Hope keeps him alive every single day. And while he's been in prison, he tries to keep himself busy. He's earned 3 different college degrees. He tutors inmates that want to get their GED. He's kept a job. He stayed out of trouble. And then he fights for himself also. He writes letters and, fights for himself on a daily basis.
I just want to rewind a little bit and go back to his half-brother. In the story I was reading, it said that there was some similarities to how Deborah died, Patrick's wife, and some of these other offences that Jeff had committed. Did I read that right?
Yes, you did. Every criminal leaves a mark.
Okay.
And that is something that the police look at. And in his other murders, he put his victims in the bathtub.
Right there. Okay, so let's just supposing somebody wanted to say, well, Patrick knew that and wanted to frame his brother for that. What would you say then?
I don't know if Patrick knew the details of his brother's crimes.
That's a fair comment.
Yeah, I just don't. He was not, as we've said before, they were not close in that sense. So I don't think that that would be anything that people would think about.
So in other words, he wouldn't have been aware of what his brother was doing and the style of his killing in order for him to be able to replicate it.
Right. I mean, in both cases, the victims were put in the bathtub, and in both cases, there were pieces of furniture on all of his victims.
Wow. So it was almost identical. Would you say it was almost identical?
Right.
And go on.
Deborah was wet, so the bathtub had been filled. And whether or not the furniture was put on top of her to keep her down, we don't know. But by the time Patrick got there, she was wet, but the water was at the bottom. There was no water left. Right. So, yeah.
Here's the thing. In a modern world, I'm a great believer in faith, and I hope, I live in hope for the good and the greater good, and I'm fast beginning to wonder how we as a society have managed to get ourselves in the place where the truth is no longer the truth, and what's right or doing the right thing that doesn't stand for much anymore. And when we look at some of the things that are taking place right across our world, even going down into Gaza with Palestine, and just looking at how heads of states and governments and people conduct themselves on right across the board on most issues, are we surprised that we still have this lack of integrity and justice when we're in, we're not even the 21st century, we're in the 22nd century now, with all the modern technology that we have, with all the forensic evidence and how far we've moved from these dinosauric years where it was difficult to be able to trace the truth. We're able to now, we send men into space, and they're able to go and take samples from dead bodies of 40 or 50 years ago and do forensics and re-examine and I'm just wondering, why are we not able to find enough factual evidence to prove that Rodney Patrick McNeal did not commit the crime and the other person did? I'm just struggling to work out why we can't get there. Maybe you could answer that for us, Alex. I think Alex has gone again. Maybe you're going to have to answer it for us.
Okay. I don't know how to answer your question. Patrick is one of, thousands and thousands of people that are in our prison system that are wrongfully convicted. It is estimated by the California Innocence Project, Northern California Innocence Project, that there is about 2 to 5% of our prison population is wrongfully convicted. So if we do even 1%, that would mean that 20,000 people are wrongfully convicted. Wow. So to answer your question, I don't know how to answer your question, but I can give you this number. And it happens all the time. The truth is not the truth anymore.
And ain't that the truth? So let's just talk about what you've been doing to try and help Patrick in this time. Let's go there for a bit. So how did you get to hear about this case?
Patrick was a friend of mine way back. We both went to college together, but we separated. I was on the East Coast. He was on the West Coast. I got married. He got married. And, we sort of lost touch. And basically, probably when I moved to California, our mutual friend in college said, "Hey, did you hear about Patrick?" And I'm like, "No, what happened?" And all of a sudden, I was like dumbfounded that I could not believe that this had happened to him. So eventually I got in contact with him, and we then became friends again. And because I'm that type of person where I hear about something that's so unjust, I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and walk away. So I got involved in his case about 2 years ago. What I do for him is try to make his case aware, just like you found him on Facebook, made a Twitter account. I've written to congressmen. I've written to lawyers. I've tried to find him forensic animation people. I've tried to find him blood splatter experts. So I've really tried to do as much as I can, not having any clue what I was walking into about 2 years ago. So it's just bringing his case to light, like this radio show, like Facebook, where people can really see his truth, because behind bars, his voice is silent. He truthfully has no voice anymore. And so people like me, like Alex, like the California Innocence Project, like Liquid Pictures that make his movies for him, like you, really are his voice.
In these outreaches that you've done in order to try and create awareness for Patrick, what's been your general feedback? When people have heard what you've had to say about the case and your opinion of his wrongful conviction, the evidence that sways against that, what's been the general feedback that you've got from those that you've approached on Patrick's behalf?
Well, almost like your feedback, where there is no way that this could have happened. That's sort of the same. That's the feedback that I get all the time.
You've said that you've contacted congressmen, and these are the type of people that are coming back to you and saying, "Well, I haven't got a clue how this happened."
Well, I don't. I got one letter from a congressman, Gloria McLeod, who actually wrote a letter to Governor Brown, stating that she felt that Patrick was innocent and would he please grant clemency. So I did get one letter back. Right. Normally you don't get response from them, but I do. The California Innocence Project tweets the governor every single day, on behalf of the California 12, because Patrick is part of what they call the California 12. So we try to make his case public, and get it out there, and get on the radio, and get on TV, and get articles written about him. And because the governor of California, Jerry Brown, has had his case for 2 years. And the California Innocence Project walked from San Diego to Sacramento, which is about 712 miles, to present Governor Brown the cases of these 12 people. And they did this 2 years ago.
And are you getting a lot of coverage outside of social media?
Not as much as I wished. I've been on, this is my second radio show. Crime Watch Daily, which is a show here, has contacted me to see if they could do his story. Unfortunately, the problem with California prisons is that they do not allow cameras into their prisons. So it's very difficult to do a show on somebody when you can't film them. Okay. So that's been, I've had 2 people offer to do a documentary, but then realized, oh, we can't walk into the prisons with cameras? No, you can't. So that's sort of been the downfall with trying to get his personal story and, his story out there right now.
Have you been to visit him, Patrick, since he's been?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
And what is he? What has his mood been like when you've gone to visit him?
He's always positive. He always talks about coming home. Many times we talk about his case and, hey, what's next? What can you do? What's going on? He was very interested in this radio show. What's it called? How long are you going to be on it? So he's very aware of what people do for him. And, on Facebook, I got some person to write his story. So he is working on his story right now to put on an online newspaper. So he's always positive, always trying to think of one more thing that can help. He contacts the Innocence Project continually, asking them, what's going on with his case. So that's who he is.
I mean, he's served 18 of a minimum of 30 years, right? So because you've got 30 years to life. So
yes.
Does that mean that he's going to have to serve 30 years?
No. He goes to parole. He goes to the board in 7 years.
So that would be 25.
Yes.
25 of 30 years.
Yes.
Are you planning, if he ends up having to serve the whole 25 years, are you planning to fight after he's released?
I think that depending upon how he is released, he would plan on fighting to clear his name after he is released. So it depends upon how he is released, if he just gets clemency or if his record is clean, because he understands the consequences of coming out of prison with a record. Whether he's innocent, but he still is going to have a record. So he's going to have to fight that. It's going to be hard for him to get a job. I'm not sure if he can get a passport. So his life still will be hard on the outside.
I mean, the bottom line is whatever happens, because of what he's just experienced, getting back on track for him is going to be a very difficult thing indeed, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what else can be done for him while he's incarcerated, while he battles for his freedom? What else can people do to help this cause?
Well, I think people could write the governor on his behalf. And Alex, if you're still here, you can chime in as well. I think that people could, I think he's looking for a blood splatter expert. I think he also is looking for a private detective that might want to go through this case with a fine-tooth comb and see, would be willing to go to court again and try to find new evidence. Because if new evidence can be brought to the court, they can go back to court again, but it only has to be new evidence. So that's hard to find after 18 years. But if a private detective went in and said, oh my gosh, this was never brought up, then they can go back to court.
Okay. And then obviously everything else that was used either for or against can be revisited, right?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I said, and then everything that was used either for or against him can be revisited.
No, once it's been brought up, it can't be revisited.
Okay.
So it only has to be new evidence. And one of the things that is sort of unbelievable in this case is that his original lawyer had this piece of paper that states that Deborah was in late rigor mortis at 12:42, and he never used it.
Why?
But because
go on.
But because he knew about it, because this piece of paper was presented to him, it will now be hard to use this piece of paper again.
Because it's actually not new evidence. It's something that's always been
right.
In. Okay.
But it was never used.
Why?
It was never presented.
Why wasn't something as strong and as powerful as that, which could have possibly exonerated him, why wasn't it used?
That's the $1 million question.
You see, here's the thing. I asked the question at the beginning, what was his defense like? And that's the reason why I asked that question. Because for me, when there is so much evidence to suggest that somebody is innocent, and they really are innocent, the first place you've got to look at is how well was they defended? And if there is enough evidence to suggest that the individual should never have been found guilty in the first place, then before you look at the jury, before you look at the prosecution, which may well have done a good job, you've got to look at the defense and ask yourself, did they do everything that they could have and should have done in order to secure a not guilty verdict for their client? And
I have heard that no, his defense was not good. He actually appealed his defense for ineffective counsel and lost.
Wow.
So it is almost impossible to get a trial on ineffective counsel unless your counsel is asleep or, so he did appeal for ineffective counsel because my understanding is that there was only one person that his lawyer brought to the stand. One.
Did nobody not question? Did nobody not question?
So, yeah. So and it also took 9 days to deliberate his case. And he was arrested 9 months later.
Wow. I mean, the thing is, here in the UK, we could probably sit down and we'll probably say only in America could this happen. But we've had, we went through a whole series of wrongful convictions in this country for many years, and we had organisations like Liberty and stuff like that was set up deliberately in order to fight against miscarriages of justice and wrongful convictions. And in fact, it's something that happens far less now than ever in this country. And I think in order for wrongful convictions to be reduced in the amount that actually get convicted, the system in America has to change. Are you calling for reform? And if so, what sorts of reform would you be calling for in order to make sure this and other things like it don't happen again?
Absolutely. We have to have reform in this country because this is happening all of the time.
So what sorts of reform are you calling for? And what sorts of reform would have assisted Patrick at this time?
Definitely ineffective counsel. If your lawyer only puts one person on the stand in your defense, I would say that you should be given a different defense lawyer. This was a court-appointed lawyer. So it is almost as if, the more money you have, the better lawyer you have, the better chance you have. The less money you have, the less chance you have. So, yeah, there has to be reforms. The first exoneration in this country was in 1989. And thus far, here in 2016, only 337 have been exonerated.
I mean, is it the California Innocent Project we're talking about here?
Yes, there's two of them. There's a northern one and the southern one. He is in the southern one in San Diego.
Okay. So, how many people are they suggesting are currently languishing in an American jail with the possibility of a wrongful conviction?
Well, it is estimated that 2 to 5% are wrongfully convicted. So if we even take 1% of our prison population here in America, because 1 out of every 100 Americans are in prison, that's insane. So if you take 1% of that, that is 20,000 wrongfully convicted people in our prison systems.
That's a lot of wrongful convictions.
And that's just 1%.
Wow. You know, I want to hear some more about Rodney Patrick McNeal, because this man should not be in prison. What do you think he would be doing if he was free now?
Well, he would be a police officer, and I truly believe that because that was his dream. He also wanted to be a pilot. So, you know, he was on that path. He was 28 years old when he was arrested. So, you know, he was on that path of pursuing his dream. He was 6 months away from his master's degree when he was arrested in international studies.
Wow.
So he was going to school. He was working full time. He was a homeowner. He was going to church. He was raising 2 daughters. He had one on the way. You know, and when you think about the victims in this case, not only Patrick, but his daughters, because of his crime, they have never allowed him to see minors. So because they said that he murdered his wife, so he murdered a minor as well because she was pregnant.
Yep.
He has never been allowed to see his children in prison.
Wow.
His daughters are now. The sad part is his 6-year-old is now 23 years old, and Patrick is a grandfather, and has never been allowed to see his only granddaughter. So he's never been allowed to meet her either. The other sad part is that his 21-year-old last year died in her sleep. She died of a seizure, and he was not allowed to go to her funeral.
You know, not even in your wildest dreams would you hope to have as much bad luck and as much, as much go against you in life as this man who was striving to become a policeman, who was on the verge of a degree, who was working as a probation officer for the local county, who was a husband and a father and a stalwart figure in the community. I mean, does he blame anybody for where he's at now and why he's not free? Is he angry about anything?
No, he really is not an angry person, although he has said that when he gets out of prison, he's going to have to deal with his emotions. But because he is in prison, he has to be stoic, and that's just the way that he has to be in there to protect himself. So he understands that when he comes out, he may have emotions that he doesn't even know that he has. So he understands that even if they prove that somebody besides his brother did this, he still does not want a relationship with his brother. He also has 2 sisters that are in the family as well. So But he really is not angry about anything. I mean, he really tries to make the best of where he is. He does not call it his home. And he says, it's just my circumstances right now. This is where they have me, but this is not who I am. So he really tries to separate himself from where he's living and what his dreams are on the outside.
What keeps him going, Jen?
I think what keeps him going is he's somebody that wants to help other people. And as I said, he's now a tutor for people that get their GED. When the tsunami hit many years ago, he wrote the warden and asked the warden if he could collect money from other inmates and donate it to the tsunami victims. And he did that. He does the best he can do at his job. He has received numerous reviews from officers that he's worked with or staff that he's worked with in the prison that have talked about the fact that they feel that he is ready for release, that he'll be great members to society when he's released. So he tries to stay out of trouble. He tries to help people. As I said, he's now gotten 3 degrees in prison. So I think that's what keeps him strong, is honestly his hope. Honestly, that he knows he will not do it. And when he goes to board, one of the things that they want you to do is to confess of your crime. And he will never confess because he says, I didn't do it. I will never confess. So that means that means he's unlikely to get a parole then, right? Well, you can get denied parole and then go back again. So they might say, okay, you're denied because you didn't confess of the crime, and then 3 years later they might give you another try.
Right. Okay. So has he been documenting what his likely defense would be if he was to get another trial or an appeal? And if so,
I know that what he's trying to do is the California Innocence Project, and Alex, if you're still there, you can answer this. I know they are going to try to see if this piece of paper, this rigor mortis piece of paper that talks about his wife being in rigor mortis, can be brought to trial. Even though it's old evidence, they are going to try to see if they can bring it up because it never was presented. So as far as Patrick documenting what his next step is, he does understand what the California Innocence Project is doing in their next step.
And you talk about the Innocent Project having, is it 11 or 12 cases that they support?
No, they have many more. It is very hard to get into the California Innocence Project. And one of the reasons why they took Patrick is because he had written his own habeas corpus, which is a document for the court systems. And you have to learn how to do it. It's almost like writing a grant. You have to learn how to do it. He learned how to do it in prison. He wrote his own. He presented it to the California Innocence Project, and they were so impressed with not only his case, but the fact that he did this, that they took his case. So the Innocence Projects all over the country, every state has one, get hundreds and hundreds of letters asking for help. So he is honored to be with them, and for their defense.
Well, here's the thing. What is the help that they actually give it? What is the help that the Innocent Project give?
Well, most of the staff at the Innocence Projects are lawyers, so they do help him go back to court. They also they've gotten DNA testing for him. They have they've hired detectives for him. they work on his case continually. So now they're trying to present this piece of paper.
Okay. And what are they confident? Is there hope?
There's always hope. There is always hope. As Alex had said before in the show, there is always hope in these cases. You never know if new evidence is going to pop up. You never know if somebody can find something that they can use. There's many ways that they can find things. For instance, DNA is a very common way for exonerations to happen. But in Patrick's case, it's not going to work because he lived in the house. His DNA is everywhere in the house.
Was any of his brother's DNA or found in the house?
No, there was no DNA. There was unidentifiable DNA, but they have not connected it to anybody. So, that doesn't mean anything. So they never found, his brother's DNA in the house. But they did find something underneath her fingernail, which was unidentifiable, but it could have been anything. So that is one of the ways that you can get somebody exonerated, but that's what I said. For Patrick, it's going to be very hard. Plus the fact that in 1997 they did not save DNA like they do now. So somewhere in a storage unit is stuff that they collected DNA off of, but it's not protected like it should be, and that they've learned in the past few years how to protect this DNA.
Right, and so. The California Innocence Project will continue to petition on his behalf.
Yeah.
And is there any new television programs, documentaries? Is there any other approaches that you guys are looking to get involved with that will create even more awareness?
Well, one of the things I'm looking into is to look into doing another video for Patrick with Liquid Pictures, which is just so kind to make videos, because there is a political aspect of Patrick's case as well. The prosecutors stated that his coworker and friend Joe Baca made phone calls from Patrick's office phone between 12:14 and 12:19. Patrick made those phone calls, but the prosecution said that it was his coworker that made those phone calls so that they could place Patrick at the scene of the crime before 12:29. They placed him at the scene of the crime at 12:10. So when Patrick actually made those phone calls, there was no answer to his home phone because the phone cord had been cut.
Right.
But when they went to court, they said that Mr. Joe Baca made those phone calls. Well, if he had made those phone calls, why was he never arrested? Why was he never arrested for accessory to a crime? So he was never arrested. And Mr. Joe Baca is now a mayor in California. And come to find out that the prosecution, the district attorney, endorsed his father, Joe Baca Sr., for a political position. So, it starts to become a little bit political in the sense that, hey, if you believe that Joe Baca Jr. made those phone calls, why would you endorse his father?
Wow. This is very tangled, Jennifer, very tangled.
Yes, it does become a little bit, tangled, because, you just wonder, how something like this happens. I mean, if they truly believe that Joe made these phone calls and nothing ever happened to him, and, or they believe that there was a conspiracy in the probation office, why was nobody arrested?
No, I don't know what it's like to be languishing in jail on a long-term sentence, like what Patrick is. But having all of this information available to me while I was sitting there, I'd be a very resentful person indeed. I'd be very angry.
Yes.
So,
but anger doesn't get you anywhere.
No, absolutely
and
not.
I know, and as he said to me on multiple occasions, if I was an angry inmate, nobody would help me.
No. So, okay, we've talked about the scene. We've talked about Patrick, what type of a person he was. We've kind of talked about why they don't marry, why it doesn't make sense, why he shouldn't be in prison. We've also talked about who should be in prison.
Right.
So he's got a potential 7 more years before he can go up and for parole. What happens now? What do we do now? What can we do now?
So basically, he is going to hire somebody that's going to help him go to the board, and this person actually understands what the board wants to hear and how you need to say what you need to say to them to sway them. So he is going to be hiring this person to talk about, how do you say that you're guilty when you're not? So this person comes to the prison, is going to be working with him, talking to him, answering questions, trying to make it so that Patrick doesn't have to go back, so that they believe his story. And when he met with this person a few weeks ago, just as a initial consultation, she could not believe how many classes Patrick has done in prison, because he's been preparing for this board since day one. Yeah. So, he has taken the gang classes. He's taken the Alcohol Anonymous, even though he had no drinking problem. He's taken the stress management classes. He's taken any class that he can take, to say, hey, if he went to board and they said, oh, you haven't taken such and such a class. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I just want to go back a little bit. I want to go back again. I want to go back to the scene. Mm-hmm. She was stabbed 16 times, you said?
Yes.
Did they find a weapon?
Yes.
The weapon was in the house.
It was in the sink.
Okay. And the weapon, was it something that came from the house?
Yes, it was a kitchen knife.
It belonged to them in their house. It was part of their set.
Yes.
So whoever came into the house made their way to the kitchen, obviously, and found it. So, what was the forensic reports on that knife? What are they suggesting? Who are they suggesting? There was no fingerprints. If there wasn't, but I mean, a lot of blood, 16 times, right? There must have been a lot of blood.
Well, she was strangled first, and she must have fallen and hit her nose. And you know how much, when you break your nose, how much that blood does. And then she...
You look like you're dying when you bust your nose.
Right. And then she also must have been running, because she was stabbed in the back 16 times. So she put up a very good fight. So I don't know the forensics about the knife, so I don't want to answer that because I don't know those facts.
Okay, let's just go back a bit. The trail, from what sort of distance are we talking about? Did she travel around the house getting stabbed? Was it all in close proximity, or?
I mean, it was a smaller house, so she started off in the living room, and they went, they went through the kitchen and then through the master bedroom. So there is a trail. You can see, when you see the pictures, you can see exactly where she was dragged.
Okay. And again, as I said, you said that she was dragged.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, we're talking about 1997 here, right?
Right.
But even in 1997, right, the forensic, the state of the forensic and DNA profiling, etc., was at a good stage. It's not as good as it is now, but it was a very good stage, because the reason I can say this with confidence is because they were able to resample samples from the Cardiff 3 case, from the wallpaper, for example, that was found on the wall, and some parts of it was inconclusive where there wasn't much left, but there were other parts where they were still able to get complete DNA profiling from. So in 1997, which is a whole almost 10 years later, we would have been in a better position, wouldn't we? You'd have thought.
Absolutely.
So why?
Absolutely.
How much of forensic DNA profiling was used in order to verify, to clarify that it was Patrick, or it couldn't have been Patrick?
Well, I know that they have tested some of the DNA off of the objects twice, but I also know that it costs a lot of money to do that. And the Innocence Project is the one that pays for that. So, I don't know all the forensics that they...
Isn't that something that should have been done at the trial?
It should have been. I don't know if it was done.
When you're fighting for your life, you're meant to be doing everything that you can. Or when you've got somebody fighting for your life, they're meant to be doing everything that they can. And so once again, I spin it back around and I ask myself, what was the defense doing?
Not much. Well, in these cases, and I wish Alex was on the line, in these cases, sometimes they feel like they have the right man. And it's almost like a deal that they make with the prosecutors. Let's just get this going. Let's just get this done with. I truly believe that that's that's when I have talked to other people that have wrongly convicted family members or inmates or, those types of things on Facebook, the same things happen all the time. It's like, I didn't have a good defense lawyer, or, it was so quick, or my lawyer didn't even talk to me, or so it's almost, a lot of people say it was so quick. They didn't bring in witnesses. As we've talked about this before, something needs to change where, Patrick would not be in the situation where he's in right now if his original lawyer had defended him better.
Yeah, well, I can't help but believe that the defense didn't defend him at all. I can't see where he had a defense, and I think in this country you can get a retrial due to incompetent representation or whatever it was, and I'm not sure what it is. I really wish I was a bit more knowledgeable in law. Maybe if I did, I could earn myself some money and get a better job where I haven't got to run home and get in the studio 5 minutes before showtime. But no, seriously speaking, when you're talking about fighting for your life, could you imagine somebody in a swimming pool, right? And they're drowning, right? They don't give up easy, do they?
No.
They grab at anything that they can in order to get themselves out. And I'm thinking to myself, hearing what I'm hearing and reading what I've read, I just can't see where his defense fought for him at all. And if that being the case, I can't understand why law, legislation, or whatever it is that's in place or that should be in place hasn't already looked at why this man's case should not be heard again with a more competent defender defending him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the way our system works, unfortunately. I mean, once evidence is presented, it's presented, and you can't bring it back up. When they found out in 2008 that his brother had confessed to 2 other people, I mean, once again, he had a judge that, you talk about luck. Patrick's brother was on the stand, and he pleaded the 5th. And this was about 4:00 in the afternoon, and Justin Brooks, which is the executive director of the Innocence Project, was in the courtroom at the time. And the judge said, basically, I don't feel like staying. It's 4:00. I want to go home. I don't feel like overturning this case today. And Justin had told me, I've never seen anything like this in my life before, where a judge would just say, I don't feel like overturning it today because I want to go home.
Wow. What a level of disregard for someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose if you was to be sat down in a pub, restaurant, canteen at work or somewhere, overhearing a conversation of people talking about a case like this, with the facts laid out as they are, with the knowledge that we have, it'd be easy to believe that someone was kidding you here. Surely that's not how it turned out. Right?
Right. It's like a makeup movie. It's like, yeah.
And I've seen cases where when people are not being properly represented or defended correctly, the judge himself steps in and says, ain't you going to kind of object here, or, don't you think you should be... I mean, I'm struggling with this whole procedure at the moment as to how we can get it so wrong when everything points to the fact that he's innocent.
Mm-hmm.
How could they get it so wrong? I mean, we got about 20 minutes left of this show, and I want to give you every
question. I mean,
I just want to give you every opportunity to play out, to point out, to create awareness, to sell Rodney's innocence, because we're going to have a 2-hour video on YouTube that you're going to be able to post anywhere and share with anyone that needs to hear something that could sway or change the mind of, invite people to get on board and support. So I read this, and the first time I read this, my immediate instinct was, this man should not have spent a day in jail. And there is nothing that I've seen or read since that can and will change my mind. So I want you to tell us why, Rodney should not be in jail, and what can we do to help get him free?
Well, I think number one, I want to thank you so much for having us, having me and Alex on your show and bringing light to his case. As I said, there's several things that people can do. They can write the governor on his behalf, because the governor does have his name on his desk for the past 2 years for clemency. They can financially support Patrick, because people don't realize that it takes a lot of money from family and friends to support somebody that is in prison. They get a blanket and a bed and 3 meals a day, and anything else is extra. So, people can financially support him. He also is trying to start a business class for inmates to teach them how to be able to start their own businesses when they get out. So he is looking for money to help, get books for that class. You can go on freepatrick.com, which is his web page. You can read his story and share it with somebody. Also, if you go on YouTube, there are many YouTube videos about him. Under Rodney Patrick McNeal. He also has a Facebook page as well as a Twitter page. So there are many ways that you can support him, spread his, if anybody has any connections with national television or newspapers, or we're looking for a blood splatter expert, because, as we've said, it was a bloody scene, and a blood splatter expert would say there's no way somebody could have walked out of that scene perfectly clean. We're looking for a private detective that might be able to go through this case with a fine-tooth comb and find some new evidence. So if anybody, wants to help Patrick, those are some ways that you can help him.
His brother, Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
has he had any more convictions since that incident?
I don't think he's had any more convictions. However, there is an article that is public knowledge in 2011 that he was an accomplice to a crime. So we do have that article with his name printed in it. We do not know what the result of that was, and we've tried to contact the author of that article a couple of times, but he walks free today.
I just want a quick message, Jeff. You're a bum. You're a waste of space as a brother, and the bottom line is that the best thing that you can do is I better stop there. Let's. Am I my brother's keeper? I'm just wondering if Patrick's going to be able to keep his hands off him. But okay, no. Let's just get back to the story. There are a lot of people that have supported this campaign for a number of years, right? And I suppose you'd want to give a message to them as well, wouldn't you? Those that have supported Patrick, even it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but just those that believe in him, those that believe his innocence. Is there a message that you want to send out to them?
Sure. I just want to thank everyone that supports Patrick, his friends, his family, organizations that do things for free. There are lawyers that have been interested in his case that can't practice in California but still offer their services, people that make videos to put on YouTube for us, people on Facebook that support me and him, people that have sent him money. So, he has a family on the outside that really cares for him. People like you that came to me and said, "Hey, can we help you? Send out Patrick's story?" So yes, those people. Patrick, we can't do this, or the Innocence Project can't do this without people spreading the news of his story. And as I've said before, his voice is silent. Yeah, he's a number right now in the system, his voice is the people that are on the outside that are willing to tell his story, willing to help him, and have compassion. Because this is something that I'm not sure if America knows how many people in our system are wrongly convicted. When I talk about it to people, they're like, "Oh, I heard of one." No, there are thousands. And so we're starting to see more and more every single day of people being released on television and on. So it's starting to happen, but it's a very, very slow process.
Here's the thing, and I really resonate with that, because when we did the Cardiff 3 campaign back in the 80s and early 90s, we went around the country speaking at various functions where there were other miscarriages of justice, where other people were campaigning, where there were protests going on. We went and joined, collaborated, and went to social union meetings, etc., students' unions meetings, and other sorts of conferences. We went all over the place, and any opportunity that we got to share or to speak, we took it. I also went into prison to visit different members of the Cardiff 3 on occasions. And here was the thing that I found. There was a couple of them who had actually never really spent any real time in prison. Maybe a night or so, as far as in custody, a police station or whatever. But they didn't really understand what it was to be in prison. And they thought when they got sentenced to life for a murder that they knew that they didn't commit, they thought that surely no one else could be possibly going through what they were going through. And I can remember one of the Cardiff Three I sat down with when I went to visit him in Wormwood Scrubs prison. He said, "Kerv, you know something? Do you know how many other people that I've met in here since I've been in here that are in just the same position as me? They didn't do it, and I know they didn't do it. They're not just telling me they didn't do it because they're trying to impress me. They didn't do it, and they shouldn't be in here." And the jails of the UK at that time were just as full with people who shouldn't be there as people that should have been there. It was hard to split the difference. And I'm imagining in the United States of America right now, when you think of the death penalty, where there are so many innocent people being sent to the gas chamber, and these life sentences that are so willy-nilly and easily handed out, especially to people of color, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's been quite evident that they are very quick to hand out these very, very stiff and long and life-ending sentences to people of color, and yet the amount of them that you're actually hearing innocent, claiming to be innocent, have evidence suggesting that they might be innocent, and yet you've still got senators and all sorts of congressmen lobbying for the death penalty in more states than they already have it. What's your feeling on the death penalty?
Well, because I'm so involved in Patrick's case, and also I'm so aware of how many people are wrongfully convicted in our system, it is hard for me to believe in the death penalty, because I know for a fact that there have been innocent people put to death. People that might not have had the advantage of being in the Innocence Project, or people that their cases just couldn't get through the courts. So I have a hard time with that, because, being wrongly convicted, people don't think it's going to happen to you. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone at any time. I mean, one of the reasons for wrongful convictions is eyewitnesses, or, improper forensics and all that other stuff. So, I can't believe in the death penalty just for that reason.
We did a show a few weeks ago, because to me wrongful convictions is just as bad, if not worse, than the police brutality issues that you're seeing going right across the United States of America at the moment. And we did a show with a woman by the name of Antoinette Houston about 2 months ago or so. And here was a young lady that was absolutely brutalized by the police in such a way that she received so much serious injuries. $60,000 she's had to borrow for surgery up till now, and she still needs more surgery. And when we spoke to this woman, now you're aware of the Black Lives Matter campaigns and the police brutality campaigns that are on out there. This is a black woman who had been absolutely brutalized, and she broke my heart when she told us some very, very unimaginable facts, such as, up until the moment that she had her experience, she did not believe that these things that she heard being spoken about, police brutality on black people, etc., existed. She didn't believe it. She had never seen it. And in fact, the lifestyle that she was leading, she didn't have anybody around her who experienced it. So she just thought it was all hogswash and people just talking for talking's sake. Her understanding was she was brought up as prim and proper. She was brought up as a good, law-abiding, respectful individual. She respected officers. In fact, she dated police officers. And her ex-husband was military. So she had a life long-standing in the very sort of similar standard of integrity that we're talking about with Rodney Patrick McNeal. And yet, when her world came crumbling down around her, she was absolutely lost for words as to how this could possibly happen, let alone happen to her. Was Rodney just as astounded at his conviction and the fact that he was found guilty? Was he astounded? Was he knocked for six?
Yeah, he was astounded, and he just thought, oh, you know what? In 2 weeks I'll be out. They've made a mistake.
Wow.
I mean, he was astounded. He was numb. And he said, when I heard that, I just turned numb. But he said, I went to the county jail, which is where they put you before they put you in prison. And he just thought, oh, they'll fix this. I'll be in prison for no more than 3 months. They'll fix this.
How long did he go on thinking that they were going to fix this?
He still thinks that.
18 years later.
Yeah. He believes he is coming home. He will never, he has no doubt that he's coming home. He has no doubt.
There are no facts, no evidence, no DNA, no forensic that ties him to the murder.
No.
And he is guilty only by association because it was his wife whom he had access to the house and arrived first, calling 911, having found his wife murdered.
That's right.
And from how long after she died did they actually arrest him?
9 months later.
9 months later. And in the 9 months prior to them arresting him, what did they do? What was their investigation like? Who did they interview? Who did they talk to? Hi, are you there, Jennifer? Hello, Jennifer. Well, it seems like we've lost Jennifer. I was hoping that we could just kind of tie this up and round this up for a minute. But I suppose that's where we are. There are too many people languishing in prison, wrongfully convicted. And for me, the place that I start pointing the finger is at the defence. Yes, we already know that we've got corrupt police, and we already know that the district attorneys and the prosecutors are corrupt. We know that they all scratch each other's backs. We understand, well, whether we understand it or not is irrelevant. We know that this takes place. But there's always something smelly, very fishy going on when there's no evidence against you, and yet your barrister, your lawyer, your defender can't seem to get that across. It's a very strange thing indeed. Next week, we've got an absolutely awesome show next week. We're looking at the case of Sharina Shim, journalist murdered in Turkey. If you follow the anonymous, it's Sharina, and I think we're going to have her sister on the show. We may well have her mother also, Judith Poe. But that's going to be an absolutely awesome show next week. It's going to be back to our normal time of 6 p.m. UK and 2 p.m. EST. I advise you, don't miss next week's show. I'm really sorry that we lost Alex earlier on in the show, Alex Simpson, who's from the California Innocence Project, and I'm deeply sorry that my friend and co-host, Dr. David Rumey, couldn't join us today. But me, Kervin, Julien, I look forward to having you guys back with me next week when we do the story of Serena Shim murdered in Turkey. And on that one we will have her sister. My co-host, Dr. David Rumey, will be back. I'm sure he will. And I think that's it from me. It's been a great evening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. My name is Kervin Julien, thanking Jennifer and Alex for their contribution. And just reminding you, the name that you're looking for is Rodney Patrick McNeal. And if you type that into Google, you'll be able to find all the links and networks associated with him, either via Twitter, Facebook, or all other social medias and website. It's the California Innocence Project that you can get hold of if you want to find a way to support him while he's still in prison. They say 7 years before he can go up for parole. We're hoping that we get breakthrough before then. I think it's time that we bring Rodney Patrick McNeal home. It's time that he gets to spend some time with his family, see his daughters again, and start living the life that he has been sadly robbed of. Well, that's it from me. It's been a good night. I'll see you again next week on World Jam Global Radio. Thank you.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity. This is clarity.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and
World Jam Global Radio. This is
I was the
clarity.
real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
World Jam Global Radio. This is
Going on
clarity.
right now. He could be facing life in prison.
I pay for
World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity. World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
It's time for your new DJ here on World Jam Global Radio. As you know, World